Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Welcome back to Battles, American Civil War, with your host Bang and Dang. Behind the battles of these American Civil War. Moving on to another federale.
oh,
We got Henry Halleck. Henry Halleck. He was a senior Army officer, obviously.
Oh.
He was a scholar. He was a diplomat. And he was a lawyer. He was a noted expert in military studies, known by a nickname that became, it was good at first and then derogatory, Old Brains.
you know why?
He was also an important participant in the admission of California as a state.
Oh,
And he was a land developer. He was General-in-Chief of the Armies of the United States from 62 to 64. Then became Chief of Staff for the remainder of the war when old U.S. Grant took that position from him. We'll get to him and Grant. They didn't like each other.
yeah.
Seems Grant is a common denominator in all these.
Yeah.
But old Henry, he actually started out pretty far from the military world. Yeah, everybody did when they were born. He was born on a farm in Westernville, New York, up in Oneida County. The third of 14 kids. I mean, you had to have 14 kids back then.
Is that in East New York?
Right. He was born to Joseph Halleck, who had been a lieutenant in the War of 1812, though. And his mama was Catherine Wager Halleck.
But Henry, he wanted absolutely nothing to do with farm life.
Oh, Henry, isn't that a
Candy bar.
chocolate bar?
Yes, it is. The thought of spending his life in agriculture, just wasting his life away in the fields, didn't sit right with him. So, at a pretty early age, he ran away from home. Literally ran away. He put his little thing in his knapsack.
Right, a little polka dot.
Right, his beef jerky and cornbread was on his way. And he ended up being raised by his uncle, David Wager, over in Utica. He stayed in New York, huh? From there, his education took off. He went to Hudson Academy, then Union College in Schenectady. Schenectady. You New York people want some weird names. And Schenectady. If we're saying that wrong, don't fucking sue us. And eventually he made his way.
Actually,
Learn how to talk. You can't pronounce names correctly. You shouldn't be doing the history podcast. He eventually made his way to the United States Military Academy, and you guessed it, that's at West Point. Now, this is where he really started to stand out. He caught the attention of Dennis Hart Mahan, one of the big military theorists of the day. And he became such a favorite that Mahan actually let Halleck teach classes while he was still just a cadet.
oh.
So how do you feel like teaching class today, old Henry?
Well, Henry graduated in 1839, ranked third out of 31 cadets.
That's the best so far, isn't it?
No.
Who's
We've had several number ones.
number ones?
Yes.
I don't think we have.
Sure have. He left West Point as second lieutenant in the Engineers Division.
Oh.
After that, he stuck around for a bit as part of the teaching staff, then spent a few more years helping improve the defenses around New York Harbor.
Oh.
During that time, he also wrote a big report for the U.S. Senate called Report on the Means of National Defense.
Oh.
It really impressed General Winfield Scott, who was General Chief at the time. So much so that Scott sent Halleck on a trip to Europe in 1844 to study European fortifications and learn from the French military firsthand.
Oh. Halleck, he came back home, promoted to first lieutenant, gave a series of 12 lectures at the Lowell Institute in Boston. Those lectures, they were later published in 1846 as Elements of Military Art and Science. That book, you ask? Huge deal. Considered one of the first real expressions of American military professionalism. Ended up being one of the key tactical handbooks that officers studied in the years leading up to the Civil War and probably during the Civil War.
Yeah. Of course, Halleck's reputation as the intellectual, the scholar, the guy who always had a theory for everything. And that's what earned him the nickname later on as Old Brains.
Old Brains.
So when the Mexican-American War broke out, Henry, he got sent west all the way to Cali. Now, it wasn't just some quick deployment either. He spent 7 months just getting there.
Oh, wow.
Sailing around Cape Horn on the transport ship USS Lexington. That's why.
Yeah.
Why didn't you just take a horse?
All right.
During that long trip.
Horses can't swim that far.
During that long trip, though, while serving as aide de camp to Commodore William
Can
Shubrick.
horses swim at all?
Of course they can.
I don't know about that.
Halleck, he decided to translate a book. Instead of just killing time on deck, he translated Henry Jomini's Vie politique et et Militaire de Napoleon, or Political and Military Life of Napoleon.
Okay.
Because why not?
Yeah.
That little project just added to his growing reputation as a scholar. How many times is it going to be called a scholar?
None of the words are correct in it, too.
Right. He was always studying, always analyzing things.
Damn right he was. That's what we love about him. Once he finally arrived in Cali, he spent the next several months building fortifications. But wasn't all academic for long. Because on the 11th of November, 1847, he's got his very first taste of real combat. This is when Shubrick led the capture of the port of Mazatlan. Halleck took part in that operation and actually ended up serving as lieutenant governor of the occupied city.
Look at that.
For his work in Cali and Mexico, Halleck was awarded a brevet promotion to captain, 1847, for what they called his gallant and meritorious service.
Meritorious.
Yep. A few years later, 1st of July, 1853, he became a captain in the regular army officially.
Officially.
Good for him.
Yep, after that, he was transferred north to serve under General Bennett Riley, who was then Governor General of the California Territory. Riley clearly trusted Halleck because he soon appointed him as Military Secretary of State.
Oh.
He's basically the governor's right-hand man when it came to administrative and legal matters.
Lieutenant governor.
Basically, right. The lieutenant governor, apparently not.
Right.
That job put Halleck right in the middle of one of the biggest moments in early California history.
What was that?
Which was the 1849 Constitutional Convention in Monterey.
And the gold rush.
All right, where delegates gathered to write California's state constitution. Halleck, he wasn't just in the room. He was one of the principal authors of the whole document. Look at that.
California State Military Museum actually sums it up perfectly. They wrote that Halleck was at the convention, and in a lone measure, its brains, because he had been given more studious thought to the subject than any other. And General Riley had instructed him to help frame the new Constitution. Good for Halleck. So yeah, Old Brains was already living up to the old nickname before he got tarnished. He even got nominated at the same convention to be one of two people to represent California in the United States Senate. But he came in third.
Well, there's two people to represent, and he came in third.
Just shy of enough votes to actually make it.
Damn. They were like, yeah, we'll let you write the Constitution, but we're not going to let you sit in office.
Well, that didn't slow him down. While that the political work was going on, Halleck also joined a San Francisco law firm, Halleck, Peachy, and Billings. The firm did so well that by 1854, he decided to resign his Army commission entirely and focus on civilian life. He's making some money. The following year, in 1855, Halleck married Elizabeth Hamilton. Yep, you guessed it. That's the Hamilton. She was a granddaughter of Alexander Hamilton.
Yeah.
And the sister of Union General Schuyler Hamilton. The couple had one son, Henry Wager Halleck Jr., born in 1856. Sadly, passed away in 1882.
Yeah, but he was 26.
He lived a good life back then.
Right.
Shit.
Now, outside the Army, old Halleck did extremely well for himself. As we said, he became a wealthy lawyer and a land speculator. He speculated in some land and even a collector of what he called Californiana.
Like, I speculate that you could build a house on that land.
Right. Instead of Americana, he called it Californiana.
Oh.
He gathered thousands of pages of official documents related to the Spanish missions and the early colonization of California, most of which he copied. Mm-hmm. He had copied.
Right.
These copies are now preserved at the Bancroft Library at the University of California, since the originals were destroyed in the 1906 San Francisco earthquake and subsequent fire.
Ooh.
He didn't stop there either, though. He built the Montgomery Block, which was San Francisco's very first fireproof building.
Nice.
It became kind of a landmark, home to lawyers, businessmen, and later on, a bunch of gay men, and poop right in front of the steps.
Yeah.
But also the city's bohemian writers and newspapers.
Right. Same thing. On top of that, he was a director of the Almaden Quicksilver Mercury Company.
Well, Quicksilver.
Right.
That's what they called Mercury.
Right. Down in San Jose. He was president of Atlantic and Pacific Railroad. Whoa. He's a builder in Monterey. And the owner of the 30,000-acre Rancho Nicasio up in Marin County. That's cool. So, yeah, busy guy. But even with all that going on, Halleck never fully stepped away from military life. Because by 1861, right before the old Civil War, he was serving as Major General in the California militia. When the war broke out, Halleck's loyalties were complicated. On paper, he was a Democrat. And early on, he actually felt some sympathy for the South. But at the same time, he had this deep, almost unshakable belief in the importance of preserving the Union. That, more than anything, defined where he stood when things started to fall apart. Makes sense.
Yeah, by this point, we already know he had a serious reputation as a serious military mind. A scholar through and through.
Yeah.
And that reputation, it paid off, thanks in part to a strong recommendation from General Winfield Scott. He was appointed as a major general in the regular army August 19th, 1861.
Wow.
That made him the fourth most senior general in the entire army, right behind Scott, George McClellan, and old John Fremont.
Oh, look at that shit.
His first big assignment, it came quick. He was put in charge of the Department of the Missouri, replacing Fremont in St. Louis that November.
Oh.
And the department he inherited, it was a mess, if you've heard our Fremont episode.
Yeah.
It was full of corruption, inefficiency, and straight-up chaos.
Mm-hmm.
But Halleck's knack for organization and administration kicked in immediately. He got to straighten them out, and he straightened them out fast.
Damn right he did. Good for him, right? People who worked with him said he seemed focused on two main things. First, expanding his command, making sure his reach and influence grew. Dos, making absolutely certain that no blame of any kind ever landed on him. I mean, that's what you gotta do.
Right.
Combination made him effective, but also cautious. Sometimes a little too political for a man in uniform.
Can't be having that.
When old Henry took command out west, he quickly found himself working with another man who would become both his most successful subordinate and eventually his boss, his commander-in-chief later on, Brigadier General.
He'd be dead by then, but...
Right. Brigadier General Ulysses S. Grant, the old drunkard himself. Their relationship from the start, let's just say awkward.
Grant, he was aggressive, confident, and always pushing for action. He's the kind of guy who didn't like to sit still. Well, he couldn't. He was drunk. He just come off a tough fight at the Battle of Belmont.
Yep.
Wasn't a huge battle in the grand scheme of things, but it was bloody. And while it didn't end in victory, Grant wasn't deterred. He already had new, ambitious plans for moving on the Tennessee and Cumberland rivers, using both the Army and the Navy.
Oh.
Halleck, on the other hand, he was wired completely different. He was cautious to a fault. The kind of general who liked to have every detail squared away before making a move.
All right.
And he also didn't fully trust Grant either. Before the war, Grant had a reputation for heavy drinking, and Halleck saw that as a big red flag.
Yep.
So when Grant first brought him those river operation plans, Halleck, he turned him down not once, but twice.
Ooh. Got to piss you off.
Right.
Wow. Then came pressure from above, specifically old Abe Lincoln. He was getting impatient for the Union to go on the offensive. Under that kind of heat, Halleck changed his mind and finally gave Grant the green light. The result, well, it was a good one. Grant's forces, working together with the Navy, struck hard in February of 1862. First, Fort Henry, then Fort Donelson. Captured both of those bastards, taking about 14,000 Confederate prisoners in the process. It was the very first major Union victory of the entire war.
Yeah.
And more to come. Old Halleck, he didn't miss that chance to capitalize on it, though. He pushed for Grant to be promoted to Major General of Volunteers. A few other officers under his command got promotions as well. But old Halleck also used the moment to make a power move of his own. He asked Washington to give him overall command of the Western Theater, which he was currently sharing with Major General Don Carlos Buell. That request didn't go anywhere.
Didn't go anywhere.
Like, I don't think so, bud.
Not long after, things between Halleck and Grant got tense again. Grant was temporarily relieved of his field command after he traveled to Nashville to meet with Buell without notifying headquarters. He failed to send in proper reports about his forces and didn't immediately clamp down on looting at the forts they just captured.
I mean, what are you going to do?
To be fair, it was later found that some of Halleck's requests for reports never actually reached Grant. So part of the confusion wasn't really Grant's fault. Okay. Still, Halleck pointed those administrative lapses and even brought up the old drinking rumors again. That was his justification for sidelining him.
Wow.
But before long, Halleck, he reversed decision and himself on course.
Yeah.
Grant, he was reinstated, most likely because Lincoln and the War Department were putting pressure on Halleck to do it.
Right.
When he explained the decision to Grant, Halleck tried to make it sound like he was correcting someone else's mistake,
You piece of shit.
conveniently leaving out the fact that he was the one who created the problem in the first place.
Grant knew.
At one point, a frustrated Grant wrote to Halleck saying, "I must have enemies between you and myself." Halleck wrote back, "You are mistaken. There's no enemy between you and me." It wasn't exactly the whole truth, though.
Right. Wow. Early.
Yeah, these two are going to be like
Going
at it.
Yeah. Early 1862. Halleck's department was looking pretty impressive. His forces managed to push the Confederates completely out of Missouri. And we're now advancing deep into Arkansas. Top of that, the old Bluecoats controlled all of West Tennessee and about half of Middle Tennessee. A major strategic gain that gave them momentum in the Western theater.
So they controlled all of West Tennessee and about half of Middle Tennessee. So they controlled half of the state.
Probably more than that, yeah. Right. At that very point, old Grant, who still didn't know about all the behind-the-scenes political maneuvering Halleck had been doing, he actually thought the world of him. He was like, oh, this guy's great. Grant called Halleck one of the greatest men of the age. Wow. William Tecumseh Sherman, who was also under Halleck's command, described him as directing genius behind the incredible lift the Union cause had experienced in those months.
Look at that.
They loved him, huh?
Yeah, that kind of success didn't happen by accident either. A lot of it came down to Halleck's own strengths, which he was careful with his strategy, his sharp administrative skills, and his ability to manage resources and logistics effectively. But it also came from his subordinates, where the generals actually led the troops. Grant, Samuel Curtis at Pea Ridge, and John Pope at Island Number 10, for example.
Fuck yeah.
Now, historians, they've gone back and forth on how much credit Halleck actually deserves for those victories, because of course they did. Some argue that as the overall commander of the department, the success was his to claim. Others see it differently, especially when looking at how his later career played out. We'll get to there.
Yeah, we will.
And they say the real credit should go to the men under him who did the fighting and took the risk. I mean, you can say that about anybody.
Jeez. 11th of March, 1862.
That's like a store manager getting credit for his store making good sales.
Right. Or not getting good sales.
Right.
Either or. Yeah. It happens all the time. Somebody's going to take the blame, right? 11th of March, 1862. Halleck's responsibilities grew even larger. His command expanded to include Ohio and Kansas, along with Buell's Army of the Ohio, and the whole thing got a new name. You guessed it. The Department of Mississippi had nothing to do with Ohio or Kansas.
Well, yeah, but Mississippi's under it.
I get it. Just a few weeks later, 6th of April, Grant's Army of Tennessee was camped at Pittsburgh Landing in Tennessee. Suddenly got hit with a massive surprise attack.
Yeah.
The fighting that followed became one of the bloodiest battles of the whole Civil War. Shiloh. The battle raged on for 2 full days. The very first day, things looked bad for the old Bluecoats, and the old Rebs had the upper hand. Their commander, you guessed it, General Albert Sidney Johnston. We all know what happened to him.
KIA.
His second in command, PGT Beauregard, took over. Then, 7th of April, with reinforcements from Buell's Army of Ohio, Grant and Buell managed to turn the tide, push the old rebels back. Both sides left staggering casualties, picking up their wounded and picking up their dead alongside each other during a truce. Isn't that crazy? I was just shooting at you 20 minutes ago, but hey, help me grab this body and drag it over here, will ya?
In that aftermath, though, Halleck arrived to take personal command of this massive force in the field. It's the first time he'd ever done so. Grant, meanwhile, was under heavy public criticism for the bloodbath at Shiloh. That's where he got his nickname, the old Butcher.
Yeah, the Butcher.
Newspapers and politicians were calling him reckless, even incompetent. Halleck responded by reorganizing things. He effectively demoted Grant, putting him in charge of one wing of the army. Then, not long after, assigning him to the meaningless position of second in command over the entire 100,000-man force, so he does nothing.
Right.
That job was almost no actual duties. Grant privately complained like he felt it was a censure.
It was.
Even like being under arrest.
It kind of was. Wow. Interestingly enough, even though Halleck clearly didn't trust Grant, he also didn't want to see him destroyed in the press. Halleck actually covered up the full extent of how unprepared Grant's forces had been at Shiloh to protect him from even harsher backlash.
Don't even lie. He was protecting himself from backlash because he's the one that's commanding all these guys.
Exactly. And even after that, Halleck turned his focus south toward Corinth, Mississippi. This is where Beauregard's army had regrouped. He began what became known as the Siege of Corinth. Though siege might be a generous term, Halleck had an army twice the size of Beauregard's, but he moved with extreme caution. His troops advanced slowly, stopping every day to build elaborate fortifications before moving again.
Well, that took him so long. By the time they finally reached Corinth, Beauregard had already pulled his army out quietly and completely. The trains Halleck thought were bringing in Confederate reinforcements, they were actually hauling Beauregard supplies and men away from the city.
I mean, this is a common theme at this point in the war, with the whole war. We can't attack. We only have 80,000 men. They got about 3 million.
Right. Well, Halleck, he took Corinth without a fight, but also without realizing he'd been outmaneuvered. He's like, those cowards ran away. No, they did it purposely.
No.
After that disastrous Peninsula campaign in Virginia we all know about, when the Union's hopes of taking Richmond fell apart, old Lincoln decided, he says, it's time for a change. Enough is enough.
All right, I'm not a nugget.
So July of 1862, he calls old Henry Halleck to Washington and makes him general-in-chief of all the U.S. armies, which he officially takes the post July 23rd.
Right. Old Winfield Scott wasn't cutting it anymore. Huh? Lincoln's thinking was pretty simple.
I'm Lincoln. I'm thinking.
Picking up these logs and I'm stacking them. Halleck had proven himself a skilled organizer out west, and the old Prez hoped that the same administrative discipline could help coordinate the sprawling, often chaotic Union armies throughout the Eastern Theater. He wanted someone who could push his generals to work together, his genitals together, to be more aggressive, more united, and more decisive. But it didn't take long for Lincoln's optimism to fade. Halleck turned out to be less of a battlefield strategist and more, well, he was a manager. Lincoln eventually described him as little more than a first-rate clerk.
I am. Kept him around for the next 3 years, or 2 years at least. Well, Halleck headed east to take his new post, so Ulysses S. Grant, he was put in charge of most of the forces in the Western Theater, but not all of them. The Army of the Ohio, under Don Carlos Buell, was split, reporting directly to Halleck and not to Grant.
Oh.
That setup immediately caused friction.
Obviously, right?
Halleck started pulling divisions away from Grant to reinforce Buell. By September, Grant's army had been reduced by 4 full divisions, leaving him with only about 46,000 men.
Damn.
Once Halleck was settled in Washington, he leaned into what he did best, administration. He was excellent at the logistics, overseeing the training, equipping, and movement of the thousands of Union soldiers across vast distances. In that sense, he was invaluable.
Right.
But as a strategist or a leader of men, he fell flat. He had this cold, analytical personality that rubbed just about everybody the wrong way.
Sons of bitches.
One observer described him as cold, calculating owl.
Oh.
Historian Stephen E. Woodworth painted an even more vivid picture. He painted it. Halleck would sit there under that big dome-like forehead, staring wide-eyed, almost unblinking at whoever was talking to him.
Oh, wow.
And then before answering, he'd take these long pauses, rubbing both elbows the whole time. Someone even joked that the great intelligence he was reputed to possess must be located in his elbows. He's trying to admit that to blood flow into his brain or something.
Wow.
Man, it's roasting this dude.
Wow, that kind of demeanor didn't exactly make him beloved. Right. That kind of demeanor didn't exactly make him beloved among his generals or even the press. The old blue coat reporters in Washington had a field day with it. They rarely wrote anything flattering of Halleck. Part of the problem, you ask? Well, Halleck just didn't have the temperament to deal with strong, independent-minded generals. He was more of a bureaucrat than battlefield commander. It showed, and it heavily showed. Guys like McClellan, Pope, Burnside routinely ignored his orders or brushed off his suggestions altogether. Did you hear what I said? Yeah, I got you, bud.
Whatever. A perfect example of that came during the Northern Virginia campaign in 1862. Halleck tried to get McClellan to send reinforcements to help John Pope, but McClellan dragged his feet. It was all, we all know, disaster. Pope's army was overwhelmed at the Second Battle of Bull Run, and the Union suffered a humiliating defeat again. That moment marked a turning point for Halleck. Lincoln had given him what was basically total authority, full power, full responsibility as general-in-chief.
Oh.
After Pope's defeat, though, Lincoln noticed something shift in him. The president later said he ran it on that basis till Pope's defeat, but ever since that event, he has shrunk from responsibility whenever it was possible.
Oh, wow.
In other words, Halleck's confidence and Lincoln's confidence in him both collapsed right after that battle of Second Bull Run.
He's like, is it me?
Well, to be fair to Halleck, he wasn't exactly working with a dream team, especially in the East. Most of the generals under him there, and keep in mind he didn't pick them. They were hesitant to take bold action against old Lee. Nobody seemed eager to take real risks, and even in the West, outside of Grant, a lot of his commanders were overly cautious. Not the kind of aggressive, decisive leaders Lincoln was hoping for.
No. I think they're all just hoping, hey, let's just call it good and we can have two different countries here.
I don't think anybody was thinking that.
Right. Top of that, Halleck didn't have so much freedom as he thought he had. Lincoln had promised that the general-in-chief would have full control over military operations, but in reality, both the president and Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, constantly involved in the details, sometimes too involved. They micromanaged strategy.
Exactly why old John Reynolds didn't want to take the job.
He knew he was smart. They micromanaged strategy, they micromanaged movements, and even personal decisions. Like, you can't poop.
You can't shave your beard.
You can't poop between these hours.
Sorry. Actually admitted as much in a letter he wrote to William Sherman in February of 1864. He said, I'm simply a military advisor of the Secretary of War and the President, and must obey and carry out what they decide upon, whether I concur in their decisions or not. As a good soldier, I obey the orders of my superiors. If I disagree with them, I say so, but when they decide, it is my duty faithfully to carry out their decision.
Good for you, bud. So you shouldn't even be saying.
He's also saying that probably to persuade William Sherman to be a good boy and follow orders as well.
Right, yeah. Well, that sounds like a guy that follows orders no matter what. Biographer John Marszalek, he points out that Halleck kind of built that position for himself. He refused to take responsibility or issue clear and decisive orders to his subordinates. He made himself into exactly what he described, an advisor, not a commander. Lincoln and Stanton hadn't brought him to Washington to advise. They brought him there to lead, to replicate the kind of success he had in the West. But Halleck, he never stepped up to that challenge. Instead, he backed away, far away from it, letting others take control of the direction of the war. And
you can tell Lincoln and Stanton were serious about giving up that control. Because when Grant eventually came east to take over the same position, they actually did step back.
Right.
They gave him advice, obviously, and they outlined broad strategic goals, but they left him alone to execute the war as he saw fit. The difference was that
Right.
Grant took on the responsibility that Halleck never wanted, and that's what made all the difference in how Riss remembers the two of them.
Exactly. Right. March 1864. Tables had officially turned for Henry Halleck. His old subordinate out west, Ulysses S. Grant, just been promoted to lieutenant general and made general-in-chief of all Union armies. This is a position Halleck had himself. He just had that 2 years earlier. This meant that Halleck was getting, well, a demotion, though he tried to make it sound nicer. Officially, he was relieved at his own request, which was the 19th century version of, we're letting you step down gracefully. You can either get fired or resign, take this severance package. In reality, Grant was now running the war, and Halleck was reassigned to serve as a chief of staff, basically the top administrator for the entire Union Army, which means nothing again.
Well, here's the thing, though. This was actually the perfect setup for him. Halleck, he might not have been a battlefield genius or a bold strategist, but he was an excellent organizer, as we've seen. He thrived in paperwork and logistics, and making sure armies had what they needed, which was food, ammo, reinforcements, all the essentials. And with Grant now leading operations directly in the field, the two actually made a surprisingly effective team. During the brutal Overland Campaign and the long, grinding Richmond-Petersburg Campaign of 1864, Halleck, he ensured Grant's forces stayed supplied and equipped. A massive undertaking that ultimately helped wear down Lee's army, because we all know Lee's army wasn't supplied and equipped.
Grant, he also handed Halleck a big chunk of responsibility. He wanted him to oversee all Union operations outside of Virginia, and for the most part, Halleck handled it smoothly. He supported the new hard war approach that Grant and Sherman had embraced, which means just kick these guys' ass as fast as possible, targeting not just Confederate armies, but the Southern economy itself. Burn it down, baby. Halleck fully backed Sherman's march to the sea, and he approved of Philip Sheridan's campaign to destroy the Shenandoah Valley's resources.
Yeah.
We'll rebuild it. Don't worry, guys.
Okay. But, as we know, old habits die hard. It's when the ill-fated Red River campaign rolled around. Red River. A messy, doomed attempt to occupy eastern Texas. It was Halleck who had pushed for it in the first place, despite opposition from both Grant and Nathaniel Banks. When the whole thing went predictably sideways, Halleck quickly tried to shift the blame, claiming afterward that it had been Banks' idea all along.
Oh, really? Come on, bud.
Well, that move, quietly sidestepping failure while taking credit for success, that's classic Halleck.
Sure the hell was. Sure the Halleck was.
Right. Even in a role that finally suited his talents, he couldn't resist his instinct to be a piece of shit and protect his reputation first and foremost.
That's all they worried about,
Jeez.
most of them. After Lincoln's assassination, the balance of power in Washington shifted, and it shifted heavily. And Henry Halleck, ever the survivor, suddenly found himself on the move once again. Secretary of War Stanton, who had never been particularly warm of Halleck, took it upon himself to reassign him to Richmond, the fallen Confederate capital. Like, go down there and check that shit out. On paper, it sounded prestigious, commanding the army in the heart of the defeated South. But in reality, a quiet demotion. Halleck had just lost his powerful role as chief of staff of the entire Union Army. And not long after that, a new controversy erupted. One that would permanently damage one of Halleck's most important friendships. And you guessed it. It was when General William Tecumseh Sherman negotiated the surrender of Confederate General Joseph E. Johnston in April. He offered terms that were far too generous for the mood in Washington. Sherman thought he was following Lincoln's guidance toward a lenient peace, but Lincoln was dead.
It doesn't matter what that motherfucker wants.
The country wanted punishment, not reconciliation.
That's true. And that deal was immediately condemned. Newspapers, they accused Sherman of overstepping his authority.
Now.
And Stanton, he privately seized.
Oh, what a bitch.
Sensing an opportunity to win points with the powerful Secretary of War, Halleck, he sided with Stanton, and then made things worse by sending orders to other Union generals telling them to ignore Sherman's commands.
Oh, wow.
Sherman, predictably, was furious. He felt betrayed, not just professionally, but personally. Halleck had once been one of his strongest supporters. Years earlier, when Sherman suffered a mental breakdown during his command in Kentucky, it was Halleck who had taken him under his wing, reassigned him, and helped restore his whole career.
Damn right.
Well, that bond shattered overnight.
Just like that.
What followed was an angry back and forth of letters, some biting, some pleading, with Halleck trying to justify his behavior and Sherman growing only more livid with every word.
Pissed. He's like, this son of a bitch. Wow. When Sherman's army marched north to participate in the grand review of the Union armies, it passed through Richmond, where Halleck was in command. Halleck, perhaps trying to reassert authority, ordered one of Sherman's corps to pass him in review. Sherman flatly refused, said, Instead, he said, men, we're going to march through Richmond with colors flying and drums beating as a matter of right, not by Halleck's leave.
Right, because we can, not because Halleck wanted us to.
Damn right, baby. Wow.
As tens of thousands of Union soldiers filed past Halleck's home, not a single salute was given.
Oh.
Halleck stood silently on his porch, watching the entire army pointedly ignore him.
Oh, wow.
Realizing too late that he destroyed a friendship more valuable than Stanton's fleeting favor, Halleck wrote Sherman a letter of apology, a humble, almost desperate attempt to mend fences.
Right, Mrs. Buddy.
But Sherman, he wasn't having it. He never forgave Halleck ever again for publicly undermining him.
Yeah, people held grudges for a long time back then.
Sure did.
Wow.
I'm surprised they didn't try to duel.
Right. Well, decades later, Sherman sat down to write his memoirs. He couldn't quite bring himself to condemn his old superior entirely. In a rare show of restraint, he wrote that he would praise Halleck to the extent he thought was deserved. It was faint praise, but for Halleck, a man who lived his whole life on reputation and rank, it was about as close to redemption as he would ever get. He's like, oh, okay.
You know, he
likes me.
he bought that memoir, and the first thing he was looking for was his name. When it came to opinions of Halleck by fellow officers and historians alike, it seemed like everyone had something to say, and most of it not very good.
Right.
George McClellan, he had strong opinions about him.
This guy shouldn't have an opinion about anybody.
Right. And they weren't flattering either. When McClellan, who was then General-in-Chief, had appointed Halleck to replace Fremont in the West, he had done so expecting a capable administrator and military mind. What he got instead was, in his view, something else entirely. McClellan later said, Of all the men who I have encountered in high position, Halleck was the most helplessly stupid.
Oh, wow.
It was more difficult to get an idea through his head than can be conceived by anyone who has never made the attempt.
Oh, wow.
I do not think he ever had a correct military idea from beginning to end. In a letter to his wife, McClellan doubled down on that. He says, he does not understand strategy and should never plan a campaign.
Wow.
Jeez.
Dang. Sentiment wasn't isolated in McClellan either. Many of Halleck's peers and later historians saw him as a man whose intelligence was buried under his own rigidity. Historian Kendall Gott painted a detailed picture of Halleck's leadership style. Did he actually paint one? Literally. According to Gott, Halleck's brilliance in organization, his brilliance in planning, and his brilliance in coordination was undeniable. But so was his inability to connect with those under his command. He was distant. He was methodical. Preferred working from behind a desk rather than leading from the field. Gott wrote, although he had impressive credentials, Henry Halleck was not an easy man to work for. The nature of his job and his personality often provoked antagonism, hatred, and contempt. Halleck's strengths were organizing, coordinating, planning, managing. He could also advise and suggest. And he sometimes ordered subordinates where and when to make a move, but he never was comfortable doing it himself. Halleck seldom worked openly, and as a department commander, he was always at headquarters, separated and aloof from the men, which is never good. His decisions were the result of neither snap judgments nor friendly discussion, but calculated thinking. He was also prone to violent hatred and never cultivated close relationships. In closing, he generated no love, no confidence, no respect.
He got no respect.
Quote unquote.
Even British generals and a military historian called J.F.C. Fuller's chiming in, even harsher, though.
Oh, wow.
He called Halleck a cautious, witless pedant who had studied war and imagined that adherence to certain strategical and tactical maxims constituted the height of generalship.
I don't think British have anything to say about doing anything with the wars.
Fuller, he goes on to quote author W.E. Woodward's biting description of Halleck as a large emptiness surrounded by an education.
Oh, he was educated.
He also went on to argue that after the siege of Corinth, when Halleck commanded an army of 115,000, he squandered an opportunity for decisive victory.
I mean, you really can't. I mean, most McClellan,
everybody did. Right?
Everybody, they're all
at one point or other, somebody squandered an opportunity for victory. Fuller believed that Halleck could have crushed PGT, Beauregard's army, taken Vicksburg, and even occupied Chattanooga, placing him in position to threaten Richmond itself.
easily.
Instead, by moving slowly from Pittsburgh Landing to Corinth and spreading his forces thin afterwards, Halleck let the Confederates slip away.
Common theme throughout the whole war until Grant said no, and Sherman said no, and Sheridan was like, "I follow." Fuller, he concluded that Halleck's reassignment to Washington as general-in-chief was, ironically, a blessing for the old bluecoats. In Fuller's words, removing Halleck from the field eliminated a substandard general and freed Grant to develop his strategic genius, ultimately leading to the capture of Vicksburg and the opening of the Mississippi River, which we can all say Vicksburg, Gettysburg, and all that was the turning point of the war. Once Louisiana got taken and up through the Mississippi, that was it. And that was what? Before late 1862, probably?
New Orleans got taken before Vicksburg. So.
Right. But even Washington, Halleck's reputation continued to sink. Lincoln, frustrated with Halleck's passivity and indecision, reportedly called him little more than a first-rate clerk.
Jeez.
Gideon Wells, Lincoln's Secretary of Navy, was even less charitable. In his wartime diary, Wells wrote, Halleck originates nothing, anticipates nothing to assist others, takes no responsibility, plans nothing, he suggests nothing, and is good for nothing. Oh, wow. This Wells guy. And Gideon ain't too giddy about.
Right.
Wow. Later, Wells expanded on that judgment, calling Halleck a moral coward, worth but little except as a critic and a director of operation.
Jeez.
Wow. When Juba Early's Confederate Army threatened Washington in 1864, panic spread throughout the nation and the capital. Wells described Halleck as utterly paralyzed. He said, in a perfect maze, bewildered, without intelligent decision or self-reliance.
Well, meanwhile, Count Adam Gorowski, who was a Polish emigrant due to political strife in his country.
Yeah.
He was also a vocal radical Republican who worked in the State Department and contributed to the New York Tribune. He joined in on the chorus, writing, all the incapacity, all the blunderings are exclusively Halleck's work.
Wow.
History is not on record military conduct so below any honor or manhood as of that of Halleck.
Oh, my goodness. This guy.
Well, it's Salmon Chase is going to join in, too.
Is that Chevy's great-grandpa?
Could be. He was one of Halleck's early supporters, but he eventually gave up on him. During the siege of Chattanooga, Chase wrote bluntly, Halleck was good for nothing, and everybody knew it but the president.
Oh, the president knew it, too. Wow. Modern historians have taken a more nuanced view, but the core criticism remains. This is a new world, guys. We have to be nice.
Right.
John Marszalek, author of Halleck, Lincoln's Chief of Staff, the most comprehensive biography of the general, described him in this way. Halleck saw himself as a subordinate, not a decision maker, a follower, not a leader. This was a deeply felt sentiment, long present in his character, but made conspicuous under the stress of war. He also argued that Halleck's shortcomings weren't just about military doctrine. They're psychological. This dude fucked up in the head.
He says Halleck's personality and his performance as a Civil War general were largely the result of deeply ingrained psychological factors and the physical ailments that developed as a result.
Right.
His drive to succeed with his many accomplishments and his eventual failure to reach his potential all stemmed from deeply embedded conscious and unconscious forces. The powerful man of success was also the tormented child, and under the stress of war, the torment won out over the power. Indecision became his surrender to, his way of coping with, the turmoil that he felt all his life. In the end, the man once called Old Brains turned out to be both brilliant and bewildering. A scholar of war who could quote military theory by the page, yet he struggled to turn any of it into action.
Right. I can read you it, but I don't know how it works.
Never practiced what he read.
Right. After Grant finally forced Lee's surrender at Appomattox Courthouse, Halleck's long and complicated military career entered its final chapter. In the aftermath of the war, Halleck was placed in command of the military division of the James, which is headquartered in Richmond, the former Confederate capital, as we all know. It was a position of enormous symbolic weight. The man once criticized for indecision and bureaucracy now oversaw the city they had once stood at the center of the rebellion. Just before that, O. Henry had been in Washington during one of the nation's darkest moments, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. He was present at Lincoln's death, served as both a pallbearer and the official representative of the military at the president's funeral. It was a somber, dignified role. In many ways, it marked the end of Halleck's time in the national spotlight. Gotta go. I gotta go.
By August 1865, he was transferred far from the power centers of Washington and Virginia, sent all the way west to take command of the Division of the Pacific in California. He didn't mind. He was already in California.
Right.
The move was widely seen as a kind of a military exile.
Yeah, I gotta go.
Halleck, he served the Union faithfully, but his strained relationships with key figures like Sherman, Stanton, and others had left him politically isolated.
Yeah.
Still, he made the most of his time in Cali. While he was there, he accompanied the pioneering photographer Edward Muybridge on an expedition to the newly acquired territory of Russian America, which we now know is Alaska.
Right.
In fact, it was Halleck and Senator Charles Sumner who are credited with applying the name Alaska to the region,
Okay.
which adapted from the Aleut word Alieska, meaning great land.
For Alaska.
Alieska.
That sounds too Spanish. Right. After several years on the Pacific coast, Halleck received one final assignment. March 1869, he was placed in command of the Military Division of the South, headquartered in Louisville, Kentucky. Quieter, more administrative post, far removed from the great campaigns and controversies in his early career. It was a fitting coda for the man nicknamed Old Brains. Once one of the most powerful officers in the Union Army, now overseeing the slow process of post-war stabilization and in a reunited but still deeply divided nation, as it will always continue to be. Early 1872, Halleck's long, restless career was finally winding down, his health beginning to fail. January, he became seriously ill. Doctors diagnosed him with edema caused by liver disease. Despite his condition, he stayed at his post in Louisville, still fulfilling his duties as commander of the military division of the South. That's what he said all the time. I'm the commander of the military division of the South.
Damn it.
By God. But just a few days into the new year, his body gave out. 9th of January, 1872. Henry Wager Halleck died in service, only 7 days short of his 57th birthday.
Died from the disease. His body was transported back east, and on January 25th, he was laid to rest in the family plot at Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn.
Damn.
A peaceful resting place far from the battlefields and political storms that had defined so much of his career and life. Though he never wrote memoirs or left behind personal papers. In fact, he apparently destroyed his private correspondence and memoranda before his death.
Wow.
Halleck's legacy still lingers in subtle ways, though. There's a street in San Francisco named after him, and a statue in Golden State Park honoring the man who once shaped the Union's military machine during its most chaotic years.
Fantastic. Time of his death, Halleck's estate, $474,000 roughly, which would be $12.5 million today.
Damn.
Decent.
The money.
Someone who built a reputation as both a soldier and a savvy man of business. It was a fitting final figure.
He's one of the few
that weren't broke.
that didn't die penniless, dude. Even the freaking president of the United States, Grant, died broke.
Broke and drunk.
Crazy.
3 years later, 1875, his widow, Elizabeth Hamilton Halleck, granddaughter of Alexander Hamilton, remarried.
Man, this is fucked up.
Who knew her new husband? You guessed it. Colonel George Washington Cullum, Halleck's closest friend and longtime aide. Cullum had served as Halleck's chief of staff in the Western Theater and later on his staff in Washington.
That's fucked up. In the end, though, I guess the two men who'd shared so much of their military lives now shared the same vagina. Yeah, it was a quiet, almost poetic epilogue to the life of old brains. A man brilliant in intellect, complicated in character, and ultimately a human and ultimately as human and as flawed as any of the great figures of his age.
Yep.
I don't know. It seems to me like this is probably the most we've heard so many people just collectively call somebody stupid.
Right. This guy's just fucking dumb.
Oh, Henry Halleck.
He graduated what in his class? Holy shit.
Right. Fucking third. Oh, I guess, yeah. Just because you study it doesn't mean you're good at it.
Yep.
That's like saying, I've read every book about brain surgery.
Right. Do it.
Right. Okay. Do it.
Do it.
Do it.
Just do it.
Well, it's Henry Halleck.
Yep.
All right.
Henry Wager Halleck.
Sucks to be this guy in history, huh? 57 years old.
Almost 57. 56 and 11 months and 22 days.
Right. Something like that. Yeah. All right. Halleck. We'll be back next week for Confederate Alley. Maybe we'll do an episode about the Emancipation Proclamation.
Something like that.
I haven't done like the backstory and all that shit on that. Maybe we'll do something like besides a person.
Right.
But yeah, either or. It'll be back next week. More Behind the Battles. We'll see you then. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share this with your friends, give us a review, and we'll be back next Friday for more Outlaws. No, we'll be back Tuesday for that. But we'll be back next week for more Battles of the American Civil War Behind the Battles.
Yeah, bang, bang.